Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for all the support in my first video. It means a lot to me. You guys are amazing. Today I want to talk about my favorite horror manga artist, Junji Ito, and go through 5 of his scariest stories. I'll be counting down from 5 to 1, ending with the one I found the most terrifying. So without further ado, here are the top 5 scariest Junji Ito stories in my opinion. Number 5. House of the Marionettes. Let's start off with House of the Marionettes. The story appears as Chapter 7 in Volume 10 of the Horror World of Junji Ito collection, a massive book that compiles all of his short stories in one volume series. I still remember watching the anime adaptation of this story while I was on holiday last year. For anyone curious, it was featured as the second half of episode 4 in the Junji Ito collection anime. Personally, I thought it was really well done. But now, let's focus on the actual source material and find out what makes this story so unsettling. The story begins with Haruhiko's family, who travel around Japan and perform puppet shows. Because of this, they never stay long enough for him to make any friends. While in one town, he manages to befriend a girl named Kinuko and introduces her to his family's puppets. She's scared by a creepy-looking puppet called Jean-Pierre, owned by his brother Yukihiko. Soon after, the family moves again, but Kinuko promises to see Haruhiko again sometime in the future. When the father becomes sick, the family settles in an apartment, and Haruhiko's brother expresses a chilling belief that her father is controlled by the puppets, rather than the other way around. That night, Yukihiko runs away, and after their father passes away, Haruhiko and his sister Natsumi eventually establish their own lives. Years later, Haruhiko reunites with Kinuko, now becoming his girlfriend, and receives an invitation from Yukihiko, who is now wealthy and lives in a mansion where he and his families are suspended by wires, controlled by hired puppeteers. While Haruhiko is disturbed, Natsumi is amazed and decides to become a puppet herself. When Haruhiko visits Yukihiko's house again, Kinuko secretly follows, only to be lured inside by Jean-Pierre. Haruhiko realizes that Jean-Pierre was in control of Yukihiko all along, manipulating his mind. In a horrifying climax, Haruhiko finds Kinuko suspended from his ceiling. He destroys Jean-Pierre, rescues Natsumi, but discovers that Yukihiko and his family have become wooden marionettes, leading him to question whether they were truly human in the first place. Pretty scary story, right? In my opinion, the scariest part was when Yukihiko ran away, only to return years later with his entire family transformed into human puppets. It really makes you wonder what happened to him during all those years away from Haruhiko and Natsumi. While this tale did make me slightly uncomfortable, especially with the idea of turning into a puppet yourself, it's still nothing compared to the other stories on this list. Let's keep going. Number 4. Tomi. Tomi is one of the more popular stories that came from the mind of Junji Ito. I will be focusing only on the first chapter of the story, as there is a second part, which is titled Morita Hospital. Published in the February 1987 issue of Monthly Halloween, Tomi remains a hot topic among horror fans today. Alright, time to delve into it. Let's see what kind of nightmare feel the story has in store. Tomi Kawakami tragically lost her life on the day of a school trip, with her body discovered in multiple parts. Despite this, Tomi mysteriously returns to school as if nothing had happened, leaving her classmates and teacher, Mr. Satoru Takagi, bewildered. Takagi becomes increasingly disturbed by Tomi's return, and he's passed with her, leading him to a mental breakdown. Meanwhile, Tomi's body was identified and cremated, but the missing pieces were never found, and the investigation came to a halt. Her ex-boyfriend Yamamoto and her classmates, now disturbed by her return, started discussing the possibility that Tomi might be a key witness, although some believe she might be a ghost or apparition. The story explores a troubling flashback, revealing a complex and inappropriate connection between Tomi and her teacher, Takagi. After a confrontation with her boyfriend Yamamoto, Tomi tragically falls off a cliff. Her classmates who dislike her deeply plot to conceal the truth by dismembering her body. Reiko, Tomi's only true friend, is left with Tomi's heart, which she discards in the same spot where Tomi later reappears. As Reiko reflects on the events, she believes Tomi's death may have been part of a collective hallucination. The story concludes with Tomi's heart washing up on a beach, regenerating into a new version of Tomi, hinting at her eternal and terrifying return. Wow, just wow. I think I'll be sleeping with a nightlight on because this story has officially traumatized me. It's way more intense compared to House of Marionettes, and really drives home the fact that Tomi was not a very likable person, so much so that her classmates went as far as dismembering her body. I wonder if it can get any worse from here on out. Let's find out. Number 3. The Hanging Balloons. The Hanging Balloons is chapter 6 in volume 4 of the Horror World of Junji Ito collection. Much like Tomi, it even received a sequel, Return of the Hanging Balloons. The cover art alone is chilling. Let's take a closer look at what this eerie tale has to offer. Kazuko is trapped inside her house, starving and unable to leave, as a monstrous entity mimicking her own voice tries to lure her outside. A month earlier, her best friend Terumi Fujino, a beloved celebrity, had mysteriously took her own life. Terumi's boyfriend, Shiroishi, blamed himself for pressuring her about her career, leading to widespread rumors and a wave of similar tragic incidents among her fans. Soon, reports emerged of Terumi's ghost appearing as a massive floating head in the sky, visible only to her admirers. The phenomenon spreads, and Shiroishi becomes convinced that Terumi's floating head is haunting him. One night, he calls Kazuko to witness it for herself, and she is horrified to see the apparition looming over their town. Shiroishi is drawn in by the head, leading to his demise, transforming his detached head into another floating balloon. As Kazuko investigates, she realizes that these heads are relentlessly targeting people, including her classmates. Those balloon-like heads descend with metal loops to claim their victims. Tokyo is soon overrun, and Kazuko's family is gradually taken. Her father at work, her mother searching for her brother Yuzuke, who vanishes after trying to resist his balloon. Isolated and starving, Kazuko finally succumbs when she hears Yuzuke calling from outside with food, only to witness him floating in the air, suspended from a balloon. Her own balloon hovers beside it, waiting. The story ends ominously, implying Kazuko's inevitable fate. A short 6-page sequel was later released exclusively at a Junji Ito horror exhibition. This one really cranked the horror dial from 1 to 1,000 in a matter of minutes. The idea of seeing these massive floating heads in the sky floating around a city is a complete nightmare in itself. Just take a look at panels from the original manga, absolutely distressing. And when you thought it couldn't get any worse, let's move on. Number 2, Slug Girl. Slug Girl is featured in Chapter 1 in Volume 7 of the Horror World of Junji Ito collection. This story was originally published in Japan in 1997. For how old this is, I think the art still holds up. A very creative cover with the main character's head being surrounded by a slug. I like it. This one's fairly short, so let's get into it. Rei notices her usually talkative friend Yuko becoming unusually quiet and withdrawn. After Yuko stops attending school, Rei visits her home but finds no one answering the door. She decides to go around the back and discovers Yuko's parents frantically dealing with a slug infestation in their yard. Inside, Yuko's mother explains that the doctor diagnosed Yuko's mental health as weak. But when Rei attempts to check on her friend's condition, Yuko refuses to show her mouth. This prompts Rei to recall a past incident where a friend tried to scare Yuko with a slug, a fear that has haunted her since childhood. The next day, Rei returns to find Yuko's condition has worsened dramatically. Yuko's tongue has transformed into a slug, and her parents are desperate, having tried various methods to remove it, including cutting it off and filling her mouth with salt, but to no avail. Yuko becomes very sick, and her parents, in a final attempt, bury her in a bathtub full of salt. When they check, they find Yuko's clothes, but no body. To their shock, her head remains in the tub, and her body has shrunk due to the salt. The slug, still alive, emerges from Yuko's mouth, and though she's in a grotesque form, Yuko's eyes open, and she gives a sad look, still alive in a horrifying new existence. I remember reading this one a few years ago, and it stuck with me ever since. The idea of your tongue transforming into a slug, essentially turning your head into its shell, is more disgusting than anything. I can see why people find it creepy though. Some have a genuine fear of snails and slugs, and this story uses that imagery to its full advantage. Number 1. Uzumaki. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the scariest story on this list. One of the most popular as well. You've probably seen this infamous image of a girl with a spiral carved into her head, floating around the internet. Well, this is where it all began. Now let's take a close look and brace yourselves. This story follows high school student Kiri Goshima and her boyfriend Shuichi Saito in the eerie town of Kuroizu, where a supernatural curse involving spirals begins to take over the community. The curse manifests in disturbing ways, turning people into grotesque beings, such as contorting their bodies and transforming into snails. The town itself is also affected with whirlwinds and whirlpools, ravaging the landscape, and even the lighthouse becoming a dangerous anomaly. As the town's residents descended to madness and mutation, Kiri and Shuichi struggle to understand and escape the curse, but their efforts are repeatedly foiled by the spiral's hold on them. Eventually, the curse leads to the complete destruction of the town, leaving only ruined structures. When Kiri and Shuichi attempt to escape, they find themselves drawn back, discovering that time moves faster near the center of the curse. As they navigate a labyrinth of spiral-patterned row houses, they stumbled upon an ancient city of spirals buried beneath the town. Realizing the curse originates from this hidden city, they accept their fate. In their final moments, their bodies twist together, becoming part of the endless cycle, a cycle destined to repeat, bringing forth a new version of Kuroizu. This one is, without a doubt, the scariest in my opinion. A sense of helplessness it evokes is terrifying, especially the fact that there's no escaping or stopping this curse. Spirals start appearing everywhere, and there's nothing anyone can do to prevent it. There's even a short anime series released last year based on this story, consisting of only 4 episodes, so if you're curious, go check it out. And that wraps up this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as my first video. I'll be uploading more frequently now, so stay tuned for more. Have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.